I have just finished reading The Last Crusade by Warren Carroll. This book was published in 1996. Warren Carroll was an American Catholic, unfortunately a Novus Ordo, who died in 2011. The Last Crusade details the first 6 months of the Spanish Civil War, which occurred from 1936 to 1939. Most contemporary academia, and sadly even most Spanish citizens, have a negative attitude towards Franco and the Spanish Civil War. Francisco Franco was the caudillo, or leader of the Spanish state, from 1936 to 1975. The secular left largely see Franco as a fascist, evil despot motivated by an archaic Catholic faith. Revolutionary propaganda has poisoned the minds of Western thinkers in believing that Franco was a bad guy. The Last Crusade details how this couldn't be farther from the truth. Carroll meticulously and in entertaining fashion details the factors that went into the war. Famous battles, influential personalities, and the haunting genocide of religious Catholics by the Republicans. A positive note about Carroll's writing is that he is emphatic, energetic, and obviously passionate about the Catholic cause. Although he is a fan of Franco, he freely admits when nationalists committed atrocities, although he does well to give reasonable defenses about those atrocities when appropriate. Despite his academic prowess, he writes with a popular audience in mind, and does so with a finesse that strikes a balance between entertaining and informative. The Spanish Civil War was between the Spanish government, called the Republicans, and the Nationalists, who were led by several figures including Franco. Franco and other military leaders began an uprising in order to take back Spain from liberal revolutionaries. On paper, it seems that the Nationalists were the rebels because they were revolting against the established government. However, the Republicans were rife with communists, anarchists, and socialists who wanted to destroy Catholic Spain. Many of the leftist leaders wanted to usher in a communist style of government, which aimed to wipe out the upper class and establish a working class means of ownership. Not all Republicans were communists, but they were all liberal or left adjacent. Fresh with the spirit of the so-called Enlightenment, political leaders on the left were eager to destroy the monarchy and bring about new styles of government, such as socialism and democracy. The Republicans had the help of anarchist and communist political groups. They even had the influential and critical support of Stalin, who supplied the Republicans with firearms, soldiers, agents, tanks, and fighter planes. The Nationalists weren't a totally unified group either. Composing the Nationalist faction were Carlists, Phalangists, and other conservative forces. The Carlists were a group of traditionalist, legitimist Spaniards who wanted to restore the monarchy and perpetuate a Christ-centric nation. The Phalangists were slightly more volatile than the Carlists. They were a group of Catholics who wanted a strong centralized government. They were completely against liberalism and communism, but were sometimes anti-clerical, supporting a separation of church and state. Phalangists were prone to fighting and assassinations. Nevertheless, the Carlists and Phalangists were necessary for the war and were essentially on the same page. They wanted to keep Spain Catholic and to eradicate the revolutionaries who threatened the cultural integrity of their homeland. Marxism and socialism are Jewish ideas that are incongruent with the reality of the Catholic faith. Franco was never the intellectual type. He was a renowned military leader with a reticent, stern personality, yet he was not a dour individual, for many report that he was rather friendly in person. A devout Catholic who prayed the rosary every day and commended his actions to Christ, he won the favor of most of the right and was almost unanimously named the head of the nationalist faction. Ironically, he did not favor the Carlist cause, something that Carroll says was Franco's biggest mistake in his entire career. Franco forced the Carlist military to integrate with the Nationalist army, dismissing their cause. After Franco's death, it was easy for Spain to revert back to socialism in the 70s. The war has a complex beginning. Spain had gone through intense turmoil in the centuries leading up to the war. Catholicism was losing its grip on the population. Civil wars were tearing the nation apart. Liberal ideologies were infecting society, and government corruption led to widespread disaffection. Anarchism, socialism, and communism were growing rapidly in this wake. The monarchy was established in 1931, and many political factions, both left and right, were fighting against each other. Part of the impetus for the nationalist uprising was the fact that the Republicans were committing mass atrocities against the Catholic Church. Churches were being destroyed. Priests, religious, nuns, and even devout laymen were being attacked, harassed, jailed, and murdered. This caused a national reaction with the deeply Catholic Spaniards who could not let these injustices go unrectified. Franco, who had been fighting wars in Africa, was stationed in the Canary Islands when he heard of these atrocities being committed. This mustered up intense feelings of retribution against the new government and organizations being propped up in Spain. With the help of a British airline, Franco was able to fly to Spain to begin the reconquest of Spain. He and other Spanish military leaders were communicating with each other, requesting their assistance and unwavering support against the Republican government. They needed full support in order to be able to have like a real fight against the Republican Spain. The Phalangists and Carlists were also called upon, ready to bear arms for their country and faith. Once the Nationalists received enough support to begin a capable uprising, the war began. Franco and his troops were coming from southern Spain towards Madrid, while the Carlists and Phalangists were coming from the north. Soldiers were trekking long distances in the blistering Spanish sun. Catholic chants and nationalist hymns were being proudly sung by the intrepid crusaders. Carroll details multiple battles which showcase the courage and prowess of the nationalists. The Spanish people were once again fighting to save themselves from Satan, as they once did during the Reconquista some 700 years before against the Moors. Carroll paints the Spanish Civil War as the last crusade in recent history, because in essence that's what it really was. Spain was fighting against enemies who wished to destroy her and the Catholic faith. The number of martyrs is staggering. 12% of religious in Spain were murdered by the end of the Civil War, most of them occurring in the first 6 months by the Republicans. Almost half of all the chapels in the entire country were destroyed. In a country that revolutionized the world, brought the true faith to Americas, raised up countless saints, produced multiple doctors of the church, standing idle was not an option. The country was violently split. Although no one wants to imagine brother killing brother, that is what was happening. The Carlists had a powerful motto which they wore on engraved medals around their neck. Ante Dios nunca serás héroe anónimo. Before God you will never be an anonymous hero. Spaniards will do well to remember Pelayo, the king of Asturias who began the Reconquista in the 8th century. When Spain was being captured by Mohammedans, Pelayo retreated to one of the high peaks of the Asturian mountains. The legend states that a treacherous bishop, not unlike some religious who caved in to the Republicans, urged Pelayo to surrender to the invading army. Pelayo refused. In a small cave which produces a gushing spring well, Pelayo prayed to the Virgin Mary, who by her holy intercession granted victory to the outnumbered Asturian, and thus began the reconquest of Spain which would last 700 years. Are we not in similar straits today? Is paganism not making a comeback? Are false religions and heresies not being promulgated worldwide? Are there not a growing number of atheists, Marxists, socialists, and leftists who hate Jesus Christ and want nothing more than to destroy his church? Are Catholic countries not losing their faith? Has Vatican II not infected the entire world and its church? Even the church herself has been infiltrated by modernists, Freemasons, and globalists. It took Spain 700 years to repel the invaders. How long will it take today? The last crusade happened less than a century ago in Spain. Who knows when the next one will be? When reading this book, one can't resist feeling a call to arms, spiritually, if not literally. Remember the nationalists who fought for Spain. Remember the blood of the martyrs who perished at the hands of infidels. Pray for the repose of all the faithful Catholics during the Spanish Civil War, for they will not be forgotten by God.